Another devastating attack on yet more innocent civilians, this time on a train, has led many people to think, what the hell is happening in the UK and what do we do about it? This will doubtless have left you with a number of questions, which hopefully I can address for you in this video. One of which is, how is it or why is it that they are now saying that it is not an act of terrorism? What would it take to be an act of terrorism? Secondly, you might be thinking, well, what can you possibly do to protect yourself? There's very few things you can do, but I'll explain the law and a few things. Plus, later in the video, I'll be talking about Farb Gel sprays, which I'll be giving away with membership to my channel and my website. More about them a bit later. And also criticisms of the establishment and what they are doing or not doing. What should they really do? What do we need to happen? Because this simply cannot go on like this. Now, first of all, I'm sure you'll all join me in my thanks and appreciation to the police and all of the emergency services that responded so quickly and effectively. Within 8 minutes, they had 2 suspects in custody, one of whom was a 32-year-old British national black man. Another was a 35-year-old man, British of Caribbean descent, according to the police. But the police had them in custody within 8 minutes of this horrific attack. I'll be choosing my words carefully because I respect YouTube's platform guidelines, so I won't be using descriptive language or showing any of the videos, etc. But I'm sure you'll all appreciate the police and emergency services response here. Let me just show you this short clip from the police here by way of an update on this.
Within 8 minutes of the 999 call being made, 2 men were brought into police custody, where they remain this morning. I can tell you that these are the first male, a 32-year-old male, a black British national, and a 35-year-old man, a British national of Caribbean descent. They were both arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. Both were born in the United Kingdom. As stated, they remain this morning in separate police stations for questioning. 10 people were taken to hospital by ambulance and another person self-presented later that evening. While 9 were initially believed to have life-threatening injuries, following assessment and treatment, 4, thankful to say, have been discharged.
So again, my thanks, and I'm sure you'll all share your thanks in the comments below for the police and all the emergency services in their rapid response to this. Now, the main criticism that I've seen has been of the responses of our leaders, current leaders, Keir Starmer, David Lammy, Shabana Mahmood, and the comments that they've made. Now, I'm going to hopefully give some objective comments here. So take these as neutrally with the positive intent that it's supposed to be. Firstly, in no particular order, let's go to Shabana Mahmood. One of her comments here said that she urged people to avoid comment and speculation at this early stage. Now, a lot of people have taken that to mean don't talk about it, keep quiet, don't discuss it, don't speculate as to who it was, what their ideology was, and all of this sort of stuff. Now, obviously, people are terrified as to this being a particular ideology, etc. But I have to say that she is right in the sense that we don't know and we can't speculate as to whether there is any ideological motive behind this, which feeds into my question of whether this should or could be considered and categorized as terrorism. More about that in a moment. The response from Keir Starmer was simply this: the appalling incident on a train near Huntington is deeply concerning. My thoughts are with those affected, and my thanks go to the emergency services for their response. Anyone in the area should follow the advice of the police. Now, the criticism of Keir Starmer here is, well, is that it? What are you actually going to do about it? What are we as a country and what are they as a government going to do about this? Now, that I agree with, although I don't think that can be really encapsulated in one single post here. That's not to say that I have full confidence that he's going to go ahead and actually do things about it. That's another story. But I do think that it's difficult to encapsulate that within one post. But it has been criticised for being a little bit of a feeble response. Likewise, David Lammy's response, as he says, deeply saddened by the appalling stabbings on the train near Huntington. My thoughts with those injured and their families. Thank you to the police and emergency services for their swift response. And again, a lot of the response on X is that it? Because that really doesn't go very far to actually say what we're going to do about this. So moving on to what I think we should actually do about it in a little bit later in the video, let's talk first of all that it's been said that this is not being treated as an act of terrorism. So you'll see here from one of many headlines that says, Huntington train stabbings live, cops rule out terror attack in major update on the suspects. Now, let me just clarify one or two things. I'm talking generally, not on this case for obvious reasons, which is another criticism I have, but I'll come back to that later in the video. But let me just clear up one thing first of all. It's a bit of a myth, or it's a complete myth, actually, that you would have to be foreign-born or of foreign origins to commit an act of terrorism on British soil. You can be British-born. It doesn't matter what color of your skin is. It doesn't matter what your ethnicity is. It doesn't matter what your faith or religion is, where you're born, where you came from, what your origins are. Anybody can commit an act of terrorism if it comes within the definition of terrorism under legislation. Now, I have my own criticisms of that as well. I think we should at least amend, or at the very least, add to the definition of terrorism, because for most people, not in the legal sense, but for most people, this was an act of terror. But whether it was an act of terrorism per the legislation is a matter of law. And so an act of terrorism is so under the Terrorism Act 2000 if, and it's quite simply this. Look at subsection 2 first. So section 1, subsection 2, for ease of explanation. If an action involves serious violence against a person, serious damage to property, endangers life other than the person committing the action, or creates a serious risk to the health or the safety of the public or a section of the public, or it's designed to seriously interfere with or seriously disrupt an electronic system. And then we look at subsection 1. So as long as it falls within subsection 2, which is clear if there's the use of serious violence, then we look at subsection 1. And so the first requirement, 1A, is that it falls within subsection 2. Then B, it is the use or the threat designed to influence the government or an international government organization, or to intimidate the public or a section of the public. So you would then say, well, it clearly falls under 2 because it's the use of serious violence against a person. It's clearly 1B because it's to intimidate a public or the section of the public. And then 1C is where this probably falls down if they are trying to narrow down whether this was an act of terrorism. I'm not saying that it does or it doesn't for obvious reasons, which I've got my own criticisms about what we're allowed to say, but I'll come back to that a bit later as well. 1C says that the use or the threat is made for the purpose of advancing a political, religious, racial, or ideological cause. So motive, in other words, it must have the motive of advancing a political, religious, racial, or ideological cause. And if it doesn't have one of those, then it's not an act of terrorism. Now, many of you will probably disagree with that and say, well, this clearly is terrorism because it's terrorizing the public. But that's not what the legislation currently says. The legislation points to political, religious, racial, or ideological causes. And so you might say that we need another definition of terrorism. We need a definition of terrorism that incorporates this kind of act of terror, because it is clear in the ordinary meaning of the word, people are terrorized. It is certainly an act of terror in that sense, but terrorism falls to be a legal definition. So we might say that there needs to be a change in the law. Now, the headline, my criticism here is that they urge us not to speculate. Well, people only speculate when we're not told the truth and we're not told the facts. Then people do speculate. It's human nature to speculate. So I think it's unrealistic and unreasonable to insist that people don't speculate. But that creates the risk of contempt of court. But even then, I've got my own criticism of that, because if we are told to shush and not talk about things for risk of contempt of court, which is something that could seriously jeopardize the course of justice, then obviously people speculating and passing misinformation or disinformation, and then somebody ultimately ends up on a jury, would be swayed by that information. If there were a serious risk to the course of justice, then that could be contempt of court. Now, I've got my own criticism of that, because with social media and public discussions these days, they are fleeting, they are transient, they are very quick moving. And so it is difficult, in my view, to argue that those sort of comments would be contempt of court. But strictly speaking, I'm not the one that would decide that. It would be the Attorney General bringing a case for contempt of court against somebody if they were seen to have said something that swayed the course of justice. So I have my criticisms of that, but the main reason is that this then overlaps with, well, on the one hand, they say, don't speculate, but on the other hand, they've now said, or they've obviously told newspapers that they're ruling out an act of terror. Now, with great respect, I believe that they cannot possibly, on the one hand, say no one's to speculate, but at the same time say that this is not an act of terror, or they've ruled out terror. I think that is too early to say, because how on earth can they possibly know, unless they've done a full investigation into the background of these two individuals, to completely rule out any possible purpose of advancing a political, religious, racial, or ideological cause? The police have thus far apparently said that there is nothing at this stage to suggest that this was terror-related. So this is somewhat contradictory. We have the Home Secretary saying don't speculate. At the same time, we have police giving reports. This is no criticism of the police, by the way. This is just me. It's comment on it, because I think the police are doing the right thing to say, keep us updated, to say, well, there's nothing at this stage to suggest this. Now, this, you could say, is also speculation. So we have the Home Secretary telling us not to speculate, but we have the police giving an update to say, at the moment, there's nothing to suggest that it's terror-related. So if they did find something, we would hope and we would expect, I think we would certainly expect to be told that there is something that does suggest that it's terror-related, if indeed they find something. So my criticism generally is not really of the tweets that say that it was deeply concerning, they're deeply saddened, thoughts with those affected, and don't speculate, which is of course right, because speculation can lead to misinformation, misinformation can lead to widespread disorder, and we saw that last year with violent disorder, and then people end up going to prison. Because if there is violent disorder, which I strongly discourage anybody to get involved with if this happens, the trouble with that is it will be treated separately, because regardless of what happened and regardless of how upset people are, if people get involved in that, you'll be treated for that offence, because being involved in violent disorder is an offence. You would be prosecuted for it, and not wanting to sound like Keir Starmer here, but people will be prosecuted and they will end up going to prison because they are separate offences. So however upset you are about those things, just don't get involved in any kind of unrest and disorder. And bear in mind that if you turn up to protests, then just make sure that you don't get involved if things escalate, and withdraw yourself and disappear. That's my general guidance to anybody. So my criticism is not really of the tweets, but of the general state of things in the UK at the moment. It is undeniable that these events are more and more frequently in the news. There are more and more attacks, whether it's knife attacks or other kind of attacks. There are more and more of these in the news, and people feel powerless to do anything about it. Because I had a lot of comments on my recent self-defense videos where I made it was a bit of an off comment. I said that you have your hands up like this because it looks defensive. And so, but it actually allows you to come in and defend yourself. But I said in my video that you can have your hands like this because there's usually cameras everywhere. Knowing that if you get criticized for defending yourself and punching somebody, that you can show that you were being defensive. And that really says something about the state of things in the UK at the moment. Then some people commented that you're more likely to be prosecuted for trying to defend yourself than the person who's attacked you in the first place, which again says something of the general public attitude and public view of what's going on in the UK. Now, self-defense has got to be necessary and it's got to be proportionate. It can include lethal force. If you genuinely believe that someone's going to end your life, you can use legal force to defend yourself because it would be proportionate. You might end up having to explain it to a jury if indeed you were prosecuted for it, which is not guaranteed. It's another myth. People think that you'll automatically be prosecuted for ending someone else's life to defend yourself. That's not automatic. It will still be a decision because the second part of the test for Crown prosecutors is it in the public interest? Now, if somebody on this train had ended one of the attackers' lives, I can near enough guarantee you that they wouldn't be prosecuted for killing that person because it would not be in the public interest to end someone's life that is carrying out an attack like that. But again, at the same time, this is not legal advice to go and start, killing people. But this again, it's my general criticism of the state of the situation in the UK at the moment. We've got Americans commenting on that we cannot even carry non-lethal weapons such as pepper spray. There are certain things we can carry, which I'll come on to in just a moment, but you cannot carry anything for the purposes of using it as a weapon, because whatever you carry, if you carry it with the intent of hurting somebody with it, it can make it an offensive weapon because your intent makes it so. And apologies if I'm rambling and going off on tangents here. I'm trying to get as much into this video as I can. There's so much to say and I want to say it, but there are three types of weapons. There are those that are weapons per se, things that are made as a weapon, like a gun, something that is made as a weapon. Then there is something that is adapted or designed or modified to become a weapon. So think of a glass bottle is the obvious example. If you break it for the purposes of creating a sharp, jagged edge so that you can use it to hurt somebody, that makes that a weapon. So it's been adapted to be a weapon. Or let's say you've got an ordinary stick, but you've sharpened it so it's got a point and you can use it as a weapon. That's then been adapted to become a weapon. Or the third one, which is one thing that people often get confused by or get tripped up on, is carrying something with the intent of using it as a weapon. Now, a lot of people have suggested using a deep heat spray and carrying that with you. Now, to be clear, this would need to be tested by a court. A preliminary legal view might be that if you carry that for the purposes of self-defense, then a court might see that as a weapon. In that, if you sprayed it at somebody for the purposes of blinding them, for example, then you've got the intention to use it in that way. And so you could be prosecuted for carrying it if that's the intent that you're carrying it for. Now, one thing you can carry, because it is not intended to cause harm and it doesn't dispense a noxious substance, and it is not carried for the intent of causing harm, is these things. These are Farb Gel. Now, I've got myself a bunch of these because I'm going to give them away with membership to my channel here or membership to my website. If you are a Master Black Belt member, I will hopefully, by the time I've put this video up, have a form for you to fill in for your address to send you one of these and show your evidence that you're a Master Black Belt member to my channel here, or that you've subscribed to my website, BlackBeltBarrister.com, and I will send you out one of these free of charge. You have to disclaim that you're not carrying it for the intent of causing harm, etc. Now, this is obviously not going to stop somebody like that on the train, but it will, at the very least, cause that moment of distraction, and it will identify that person if they run off. So obviously it sprays out a bright red substance, which is very difficult to remove. I'll try and find a video from Farb to put on, overlay this video if I find one. And it is intended to identify the person that you say has attacked you. Now, there are possible legal consequences of carrying it. You know, if you get it wrong, you could be accused of damaging someone's clothing and all those kind of things. But again, the same questions come about. Would it be in the public interest to prosecute you for spraying somebody with a thing like this, which might dye their clothing, if they have attacked you? So obviously, if you use this nefariously and they haven't attacked you and you just go and spray somebody and you're setting them up, then obviously that makes it an offence itself. I will take no responsibility for that whatsoever. But if someone's attacked you and you spray them to identify them and then they try to claim against you, you could say, well, you did this because they attacked you. Now, I very much doubt anyone's going to be prosecuted for spraying someone like this if they've attacked you. So these will be given away with memberships as a Master Black Belt member and upwards on my channel here or my website. I'll put the form below when I've created that form. But this, at the very least, is the first thing that you can do. I'm going to grab a number of different products and start gathering things together so that I can send them out to you with membership to my channel and my website here. So now, what do I think we actually should do about these things? Well, I think the only way to really stop these things at the moment is to carry out stop and search more frequently, give the police more powers to stop and search somebody. I mean, if I was getting onto a train, I would have absolutely no problem whatsoever being searched because I know I'm not carrying anything illegal. But stop and search is one power that the police really should have. Yes, it might be abused at some stage, but it will be very few officers that would abuse that, I would certainly hope. But for the vast majority of police officers, this will be a very valuable tool to be used much more widely to spot people that actually have these things. You will have seen the knife scanners in various parts of cities. People criticize those and say, I'm not walking through those and things like that. Well, at the end of the day, if we want to stop attacks like this and people are carrying weapons, we have no choice but to take those steps to physically remove those weapons from the streets. Then when we do find people that have been carrying a weapon or go to retrieve a weapon and attack somebody with it, then the punishment should be absolutely zero tolerance. You go to prison. If you are found with a knife that you had no good reason to have, which is the only defense for having a reason with you is having a good reason. But if we take one of the recent cases, for example, the man that attacked the guy that was burning the Quran, who had his conviction overturned, he said that he was going to kill him. He ran away, got a knife, a bread knife, came back and started attacking him with it. He did not go to prison. He was given a sentence of 20 weeks imprisonment, suspended for 18 months, meaning he has to do what the probation officers say for the next 18 months. He also had to do 150 hours unpaid work in the community, 10 days of rehabilitation, but did not go to prison. So again, this falls down to the sentencing guidelines because the judge is following those. Many of you might disagree with that. And personally, I think if we want to eliminate knife crime, we have to eliminate those who are committing it. In my view, it's not really about how easily people can buy them from websites and such things and mandatory ID checks on the door, because ultimately, if these attackers are going to commit these things, they will find one way or the other. It's not really about how easily they get hold of them. It's about how we remove them from the streets and how we physically stop them from happening and, in these cases, deter them from happening. But I suggest that in some cases like this horrific attack of yesterday, probably no deterrence was going to be possible because they probably knew they would get caught. They probably knew they would go to prison. And there's probably not a lot of deterrence would have actually worked, save for searching them before they went on the train and things like that. So we are in a very difficult situation, but we do need to take some physical actions about this. We do need to strengthen the laws, strengthen the punishments, change the sentencing guidelines, and actually do something about it. So I hope that addresses a few questions. Doubtless it raises lots of other questions as well. Check out the form below for one of these if you're a member to the channel here. And as always, thank you for watching.